Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this interview today. Today, I have David Colonia with me. He is a previous student of ours, and he is here willing to share his story of how he is now in QA and kind of like what was his journey and path like. So that some of you students who are also going through it or curious about QA, you can kind of like realize there's people just like you out there, or just kind of like what it takes and things like that. So, David Colonia, thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, how are you doing?
Good, good to talk to you, Sophia.
You as well. So, David, the first thing you probably know, even in interviews in like job things, they might ask, like, tell me about yourself. I don't want it to be so like business-like for this interview, but share what's important, what's valuable to you in life and family and your career. What kind of person are you?
Definitely. I am a very low effort person where I try to get the best results from not exerting maximum effort necessarily. And so um that kind of hampers career growth in a way that I got my first job out of college after what felt like a long, long time of looking, and I was having trouble kind of maneuvering to the next thing, and so I was taking endless tutorials, uh, another coding program through the school I attended, and it just wasn't getting me to a better result, and I got that better result through Careerist, particularly because of the focus on QA, and QA was kind of similar to what I was doing previously, so it wasn't that heavy of a transition, and I was just really fortunate that I trusted you guys. That's what I will say. Because at that point it was like between doing this or like going back to school and exerting I don't know how much money and additional years of um that would be needed.
That's awesome. So basically, with careers help, you kind of figured it out faster than having to go back to school and stuff, is what I hear, which is cool. So what was you said you tried some school? What was it that you were studying before?
So before I was studying like legal sciences, political science basically. Like I thought I was going to go into law and that was just going to take an additional 4 years of law school and then looking for a job. I looked at what the law sector was and what the tech sector was, and the amount that I would have made from a entry level tech job and law job were the same, but the requirements for the law job were crazy. Like there were people that were graduating law school and applying for the same jobs that were paying basically an entry level tech wage. So I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna go with that.
Right. And what about your yeah, I mean it makes absolute sense. Like law sounds like it's really hard, but I mean if you're like I want justice, you can kind of like figure out other personal projects to kind of get to it or find other ways
Yeah.
to like help people if that's like what drove you to it. But yeah, what about like some of your like you said there was another career before you studied careers, right? Was there so you studied law, but you realized that the job and entry was going to be really difficult. What about your jobs, your previous jobs? What did they look like before you studied careers and became, QA
Yeah, I
engineer?
was basically like a app reviewer or content tester. So that was like a job that would be placed at like a big tech company, but you're on contract, so um you're kind of out almost like they outsource the work to you and to your team. So it was just really easy to get and easy to handle, and it gave us like experience in terms of knowing what device does what version of Android is the latest version, and really got my feet wet with uh, technology as a whole. And before that, I was actually a painter through college. So I painted apartments and different townhouses and stuff. And then previous to that, I was a student employee at the college I went to.
Cool. Um, That's awesome to kind of like hear that, things are totally like different. It's like being in the painting job or like studying and then through like a boot camp program or like a training program, getting into QA and testing. Um, so what about like bringing it down a little bit more to earth and more personal? Like who did you want to be when you were growing up? Like what was your passion? What was your dream? What kind of like what makes you kind of tick or motivates you?
I think my very first job I wanted to do was firefighter, and
Yeah.
then it went into like, all right, I want to do one of those people that goes to Antarctica
Mm.
and takes pictures of penguins, and but I hate things that are too hot, and I also hate things that are too cold. So I definitely kind of went somewhere in between of like, being in a climate controlled office. And but what really, I guess, changed what I wanted to do with career wise was in college I did student government and so I did that and got to see what it was like to kind of work on a team that like pushed certain ideas forward and would do things to, I guess, benefit a group as a whole. And even in tech right now, that's kind of how I look at it. I look at it as like, all right, we're making products for certain customer demographics, and sometimes we're making those products for children. So we have to like have in a special kind of fine tooth pick when we go through certain things. And yeah, I really like that aspect of it, that I was able to kind of still do something that to me does a lot of good, because some of the stuff that we worked on is like, all right, it's going to be like the first product that a kid uses, so they have to have a certain amount of security and just usability.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it was from doing that project it was business or law, right? Where you got to work with a team to like develop something firsthand and you were like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." So what was your first like introduction or how did you hear about Careerist or QA? Did you search QA first or what it was? Or let me know about kind of how you came across us.
It was an Instagram ad.
Oh,
Like,
nice.
so I'm quite impressionable that way. But that was the one that I clicked on. Not all of them get clicked on. Not all of them
Yeah.
get the like more than 10 seconds of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And Careerist was what did, because of the focus, because and the promises and the just what you're getting from the program. Like a lot of places, give you the um it's called the compiled education, the materials, but then they just say, okay, off you go. And they don't really do much after that. And Careers seemed like it was doing much more than just that. So that's what really hooked me in.
Yeah, so Instagram ads work. That's good to know.
They did. Yeah, they do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, like what was it like kind of reaching out to advisors or what was your first like what were some of your doubts and maybe myths or things you've heard that were like kind of sus or like you weren't sure about like what maybe what was the stopping thing for you that was like you were hesitant on and then what made you jump for it anyway?
That's a great question. I would say at any time you talk to a salesperson, it doesn't matter if you're buying a vacuum or like education, you do have that little bit of hesitation. And it was just looking at my alternatives, because my alternatives weren't they were still going to require even more money or equal amounts of work. And this just seemed like it seemed very doable to me, especially being online. Like the remote environment was already in place, as opposed to doing something in a classroom. Because I signed up like right when COVID hit, so it was going to be online regardless. But the being able to do it on top of doing and keeping a job and doing work, because didn't entirely know how I was going to do that with if I signed up for a school and they have classes set at 2 o'clock or something. I was going to be able to leave work for that, and that was the main thing that sold me on it. That it worked within the bounds of my schedule, and I can do it in addition to work or do it at work. That was really what was most helpful. That I didn't have to take time off, and a lot of other programs or avenues of education are going to require some kind of a trade off, and it didn't seem like that with careers. It was just putting the money down, and that was it.
Nice. Yeah, for sure. It's like a faster, like mediums, like cost way, but like you get a lot of value out of it based on like, hey, no, we got mentors for you. We got people who can kind of see you through to the end and help you get a job as well. So I totally get
Exactly.
it. Yeah. What about like your family, your relatives? Were any of them skeptical about it? Did you share with anybody of you what you were getting into? Did you even finish your law career or I mean education?
Yeah, I did, and so I got a bit of help from paying undergrad, thankfully, from some family members, and but they're definitely skeptical out the gate with how long it took me to get a job. I so doing careerist was already something that, like, all right, you got to do something, and it was a lot of folks say that like I have some family members that are in education as counselors and such. So they say that, like, oh, you got to go do a master's degree because you throw a rock and it lands on somebody's head with a bachelor degree. And so this was kind of the even compromise. It wasn't necessarily skepticism of this kind of program, but it was like your career path isn't focused yet. Like, you're doing this job, but you're not gonna jump from this to being a computer engineer or such. Whereas getting on the path for being a QA engineer is like way more focused. Because I think even in law, it's like a bit of a gamble. Like, if you do really good, you're really good in the classroom, then you have a good chance of like making a lot of money as a corporate lawyer. But those jobs are very, very few in between. And my grades weren't too great, so that already kind of was a knock against me. So I looked at, all right, in 10 years, what's gonna have the best output, and looking, okay, I could do automation because I've already taken some of the classes for that and have like bit of technical knowledge. So but it was just about getting that first job. So for getting that first job that had the QA title, I needed something like this to steady the focus, and especially the help. Like, because I have relatives that work in completely different industries. So like, if I wanted to completely follow that, it would have to be like, all right, I would have had to go to school for it, and that was like a complete non-starter. So the help that I got from careers, having the professionals already in QA, is really what kind of just sharpened my presentation and what I needed to say in the interview. That's really what I needed, because otherwise, I was just kind of winging it.
Yeah. So, which is some of your family members are in completely different spheres. Would you say they're impressed and like now you're like a big advocate for tech and they're proud of it for you?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
That's awesome.
Especially just compared to, like, some of the stuff I was doing before. And before, I was doing the painting thing. So
Hmm.
there was a bit of that, like, oh man, just gonna drop out and just do this. Like, there was always like that bit of chance, and but I didn't let that bother me. I finished up school, and did what I needed to do.
That's awesome. Good for you. That's awesome. I love hearing good like good stories and turnouts of like, making it happen. So that's amazing. So you said you saw like a greater development opportunity and the industry looks so much brighter for tech versus like being a lawyer, for example, and like those opportunities. Was there anything about like the growth or like tell me more about like what you saw in that time in industry and like what you knew about QA. And maybe if that's like you've kind of already explained that, maybe let me know like what was your background in tech like? Because you said you took some classes, but like what made you know the industry or be more comfortable with it? What were the selling points for you?
Yeah. So previously, I think this kind of touches on it too. Everybody, like, if you don't haven't applied for a tech job or just kind of getting introduced to it, you think everything is like software engineering, whereas software engineering is maybe like 25% of the industry. There's also, sales, HR is a big part of it, product management. There are so many things to touch on, but I think with like software engineering, all right, you got to be really good in the interview and be able to like have sharp technical skills. Project management, a lot of times the entry level requires a master's degree or requires you to be in some kind of professional degree. So I was looking at um,
Like a low
tech,
barrier entry?
yeah, tech support, um, review, testing, and those were the things that kind of stuck out. And then QA was kind of like the next level of that, where okay, if I do a few years, which it was only a year for me, at like my first kind of tech job, and then I'll figure it out from there. And then about like maybe 9 months into that is when I ran into Careerist and thought, okay, this kind of lines up with the plan of either going towards, because at the time I had already taken like a data analytics course, but that was just way too, I would say way too much of a leap. Whereas QA from what I was doing was like a really like easy pivot, and it was just like adopting the kind of frame of thinking from where I was like, all right, we get a workflow and then we do this, and then in QA it's like, okay, we have to think about where the workflow can go wrong and what looks like a problem and how do we raise concern that it's an issue.
Cool. Awesome. So yeah, definitely you had a little bit of knowledge. You did some data, why do I can't say it now, data analytics, and you were thinking of like
Yeah.
low barrier entry. Yeah, and QA is like a really simple.
I was throwing darts at a dartboard, like, and yeah, the QA one really stuck. So
Yeah.
I'm happy for that.
Based on what you were learning though, like would you say you really needed to know a lot of tech background? Like did you, I mean,
No,
how much
not for.
understanding of tech do you think you needed to know before to getting started? Just for people who are else out there like and maybe don't have, you know, don't know anything about tech. How simple do you think
If
QA
you
is?
if you can use your phone to browse, to watch a movie, if you can use your laptop to send an email, that's really all you need. Like that's really the starting point that you need. Like if those things come easy, then you have a whole world of knowledge to pursue. Otherwise, the next thing that I would say would be helpful was and it still continues to see it like to this day, is just simple spreadsheet stuff where you input things or you create like in my case test plans on some spreadsheets. But that's the only I would say those two things. And it shouldn't be scary because it's not like you're creating a program to do those kind of things, which is the hardest thing. It's more so just being flexible with those two tools, and that's I think enough for most entry level tech jobs or QA jobs.
Nice. I'm glad you said that because it's like that's what we advertise as well. We're like we tell people it's like just as long as you're browsing, you're using a phone app, like you can do it. Like don't even worry about anything. Any technical things, anything else like careers can teach you and show you kind of like how to use the proper language or whatever else you need to know in the system. Um but awesome. So to ask you more about like your journey with careers and when you began to study it with us, were there any particular challenges that you faced, or like what did you like what stood out as particularly memorable or cool to you about studying with us?
I really liked how clean your guys' interface is, like with accessing classes and having everything organized. Like QA is very organization heavy. Like if you as long as you know where all your testing stuff was from the previous day, your Google Drive is at least titled organizationally, you'll be fine. And that was kind of a good practice of it. Like even just turning in the assignments, like we had to name things very specifically, and just those minor details were like those stuff that stuff still carried on into the job. And a lot of the framing, like just thinking as like a tester versus testing like thinking like a designer, engineer, etc., is done in the classroom. That's like a lot of the value that we don't think about till like way after that. Like uh, that like I see something and I'm like, okay, that's not an issue. But if I had seen it before, I might have been saying that, okay, every single thing that I'm seeing on this application is could be an issue. I gotta report that to the boss. Da, da, da. And sometimes the what you do in QA, what makes you a good QA person is not saying that's an issue, especially when nothing's wrong with it. Like that's if you raise too many issues and it is not an issue, then engineers gonna get mad. And so I think that's what I've been really good at the last year is I've only raised like P0 and P1 issues, which are like medium to high priority. Anything that's like lower is like something, it's like a quirk that doesn't need to be really fixed. So that's really helped, and that's kind of what got used to seeing in the internship is like, okay, sometimes we got to be told that it's not an issue even though we're raising it, and that was really helpful
So internship with us as well kind of
with
gave
you,
you,
yeah, with you guys.
yeah, gave you that jump start. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Cool. Yeah, so your experience with careers people, what about mentorship and your process of looking for a job? How did that go for you?
I appreciated the patience from my mentor so much. Like it wasn't the worst job market. I think now it's a little trickier, but I even have comments on that it's pretty optimistic for QAs. Because I had the I tend to ramble or tend to like just go on a tangent, and that's where I was on an interview. In an interview, it wasn't a steady flow. It was filled with tight turns, and they helped me tighten up a lot. Like in terms of like just removing the irrelevant knowledge and only focusing on the relevant stuff, because a lot of times I even saw it in like thinking back to previous interviews. I think I talked myself out of jobs a lot. Where like I would have had like a good like steady go, but I just would say something that would say that like, oh, I screwed up at that point, and I just left it there. And then like because they got to the next question or just ran out of stuff to say, and that'll still happen, but I'll have the know how now to like circle back to it and kind of close the loop on whatever point got brought up. And that's something that the mentor really helped me with.
That's
You know,
amazing. Yeah. That's a big part of like communication. So that's very valuable, even not in interviews, but just on daily talking to people. It's like knowing kind of
definitely.
where you started and being able to summarize it. Yeah. That's awesome. What do you think about careers culture? Like what is there anything you can share about, in a few words?
Def- definitely. It's very I would say it's better than a do-it-yourself mentality, because it is a do it from the ground up mentality. But it doesn't necessarily do like, but you're gonna have the assistants, you're gonna have the people around, and it's a supportive environment. Like they afterwards, you're encouraged to keep checking in and keep up with what's going on. Because I mean, especially now the job market is rough, but I'm seeing that um, it's harder for other people that haven't done QA to pivot into QA out of nowhere. Whereas Careers
Yes.
gives you that start, that gives you that first block to work with. So from that first block, it's up to you to make that second block. But once you start building, like it can go really quick, and that's what I saw, and that's what I got from it. And it's a very professional culture. Like it has a lot of hope, a lot of straightforwardness, but it prepares you to have be in charge when you have that conversation with a recruiter or with an interviewer. It definitely doesn't tell you to consider yourself to be a lackey of sorts. It tells you to really take charge of your own career and be really sure of yourself, especially in QA and in other things. That's what I would say the culture really rubbed off on me.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear. Yeah, I definitely know we're definitely try to make our students feel like, hey, no, you're worthy of this. You got to ask for what you deserve. So it's like we've given you all the tools, all the resources you need. You've been through it with us. You got this. Like, push it. You can do it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and there's also one other thing that there is no such thing as a dumb question, even if it is a dumb question. Like you'll get
Yep.
the answer. Like
Yeah.
that's one thing that is also there. But no, seriously, if you're starting with not knowing anything about technology, you know, be assured that if you feel it's an easy question, go ahead and ask it. Like you're gonna get a solid answer on it, and you're gonna have the tools. It just depends on how you use the tool belt.
Yeah. That's awesome. So what about with job search? How long did it take you?
It did take quite a while to find like the QA title where it says like QA engineer, but there
Yeah.
were like two jobs that I got before that were like, similar to QA-ish. And
Mhm.
so I got first job like maybe 1 month after finishing the course, and that was
Wow.
like a pretty good pay bump, but it wasn't quite QA engineer yet. It was still
Uh-huh.
like it was still working under like a contract.
Mhm.
But I got to see a lot of. It was my first time communicating with engineers and like having product input and seeing where a product goes wrong. That's what I got to see there. After maybe a year after that is when I got my actual software QA engineer, title, role, and all that comes with it.
Nice. What do you think? I mean, within a month you found something, even if it's contracting, but it was like a starting somewhere job. What do you think I don't know if you'll remember. What are some of your blockers during applying, or what were your fears and how'd you overcome them?
Definitely the fear of nobody likes to sign up for something and not get it, whether it's a raffle, whether it's and sometimes job market feels like that, especially not knowing which sites to apply on. That's a big part of it. So many sites have listings from 6 months ago that are already filled, that ship has sailed, and you're just not going to
Mm.
hear back because there's nobody doing any intake on that job. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that until kind of hearing the firsthand knowledge on what to do in a job search. And I see it now with friends that are like have graduated and finished and are going into like pretty gloomy job market, that if they just had used some of the skills that were here, that would expedite it tremendously. But if you're going into it blind, you're just applying, and you're applying on jank website, then the results aren't going to be that great. I think what eased the kind of doubts were sticking to LinkedIn jobs, because I had the most, I guess, recruiter visibility. They're more on top of what they post there, and then slowly but surely just getting more phone calls, getting more emails. Once I saw that happening, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna take my foot off the pedal, even if I don't get the one that I was trying to get because that happened too. There was like three jobs that were like I was super hyped about, and it just didn't work out. But I'm really happy with the one I got now, so I'm not mad at it at all.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it takes work, but you get to it eventually.
Yep.
Another question, do you know how often and how much you were applying per day or per week?
I was on the low end for sure. I definitely have that some kind of attention deficit when it comes to that and just filling out things on the computer. So I did maybe 10 a day. On my most day, I'd probably do 20. And then, but it was when I got the job I have now, it was on one of those weeks where I applied to like 20 in like a day, and then the next day, maybe five more, and then the day after, 15. It was one of those where I didn't take a break. But I did stick to the thing that I applied on Sunday and on Monday, and would kind of not do much throughout the rest of the days, just because I did think that all right, if I'm the first one on a recruiter's inbox, then I got a better chance, and that's kind of what I did stick to. But I think the one that I like my job that I got now, I applied on like a random day, so it really doesn't matter that much.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for explaining, kind of like where you began, what your career was like, or even educational side of things was like. And then let's see, yeah, like how you entered Careerist and kind of like into your new job. I do have a few more questions and I think we can kind of wrap it up. But the position that you're at now, what can you tell me about your team and what the work life is right now?
Yeah, so thank goodness, I'm still remote. Most of my team is all over the place. I have an immediate team in Argentina. I have another ad hoc team in New York, and I've also gone to LA for like an extended stay because that's where our most of our company is headquartered. So, and I also got trained over there on some hardware testing, and it's it's a lot of buckets because the team and the company works on vendor style contracts. So before where it was like, all right, I'm only assigned to one project. Now I'm assigned to like a bunch of projects and helping, much larger company as more of a consultant on multiple workflows. And I really like that. I really get to, um, you know, have meetings and face to face with different people from different experiences and backgrounds, and really show that I'm there, that I'm there for with a purpose, and that I do the job well. And Yeah, a lot of that is just having the confidence to know when something is going right and when something is going wrong, from the QA perspective. And that's really all that's expected of me. I'm not expected to do any heavier lifts or do any part of development. And because that's also what could be a bit of a con in QA is that your role is less loosely defined in some cases. So you could be given a task that is more expected of a developer or something that. But I'm lucky that QA is very well defined where I'm at, and if it weren't the case where I'd be given a task that that's where you can seek help. I see it all the time in the careers chat where people get like some database task or some more engineering task, and we're there to help each other because that's really part of what this program advocates.
That's awesome. To kind of bring it back again to like real life and real world, a lot of people work remotely right now. How do you overcome like I don't know if you get burnout or if you kind of have a hard time sometimes motivating yourself, or are you just absolutely like you love your job, you love what you do, like you don't have a problem like logging in, doing the work, or like how do you balance your work from home life?
Oh, definitely. Having my own time and setting boundaries. I would say the hardest part of working from home is setting boundaries. Like that, it's very tricky to navigate that part of it. Um, but part of it is just being sure communication, being sure that you've showed up on all the other days, and kind of just I guess knowing when you can take your foot off the gas pedal and when you gotta kind of be like 100% focused. Like there's been days where I get like um I get like maybe an hour of work, and then the rest of it is just like whatever I want. Sometimes it's but that's even when I was in the office though for like previous jobs or
Mhm.
previous it just depends on where you are. If you're at a startup, you're for sure not seeing that. If you're at a good company and they kind of have their stuff together, you're gonna have breaks. It's not all grind, but as you go up the pay scale, though, it definitely gets you have less of those days and more of those days where you're just there all the time. But
Yeah.
QA has their designated duties, development has theirs, and yeah, we just navigate the place that we get.
Yeah. That's cool. Sounds sounds awesome. Um, what about future career plans? Do you feel like you would want to grow in QA or move to back to data analyst or more of an engineering thing? Or do you think you kind of want to stay with QA for now? Like, is it just kind of like a great position to be in, or you have your sights on more?
Yeah, I'm sticking with QA. There's no way I'm touching data analytics. There's engineering, maybe if but more of a hybrid QA role. I would think
Nice.
that I would go towards automation and DevOps. Those are the two areas that are both extremely lucrative and still within QA bounds.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more of a like what does I'm very team oriented at my company. Very they've done a lot for me. They showed them so I think of like, all right, am I adding value by like knowing all of this? And right now, no, we don't have the need for automation or DevOps because the people that we have on top of that are already really good. So within this, it's only been there for a year, so I just need to do what I do very well. And now that I've been there, I get the feedback from my lead that think about what you want, going forward, leadership. How can we help you? And that's so reassuring to hear because I'm pretty sure if I weren't doing things right, I wouldn't hear that.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy to know that, especially in a job market that's a bit unsteady. And if it and whatever happens, knock on wood, I know that I've done this before. I'm going in with experience, and I think the whole thing of having a negative outlook on a job market is because the experience just isn't there. Unfortunately, like that's the way that I'd learned that early on from applying straight out of college without internship. That we don't necessarily hear that. Oh, you got to prioritize getting an internship versus prioritizing graduating. Where um, I had friends that took 7 years to finish their degree, but they also did two internships on top of that. So they left school with some money and didn't have to spend more than 3 months looking for a job. Whereas, if you just kind of have your head like me, I just had my head down. I did stuff on the side for money, but I had a hell of a job looking for a job. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that really screwed with my outlook. But then coming into Careerist and seeing how they advocate for us and set us on a good focused mind state and have something on a resume that we can say that we did. That already beats out a lot of forms of education.
That's awesome. Well, David, thank you again for your time. I think I got maybe like two more last questions, but
All good, all good.
first will be, what advice do you have for someone who's kind of like still on the fence about joining QA or not? What do you have to say to people who are like still considering or not sure about QA?
I would say don't immediately listen to, somebody that's discrediting something or anything. There's big risks and there's small risks. I would say, program like Careerist is somewhere in between. And be flexible just with yourself and for looking for a career in general, because you could do all the tutorials in the world, you could do all of the all the self start, but at some point, you gotta buy into something. And there's a lot of other companies that ask you to expend yourself much harder, much more thin. But I really appreciate that Careerist was definitely on the lower end of those kind of risks, and it's paid off. I'm very happy I made this decision.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Well, David, if anybody else wants to connect with you on maybe LinkedIn or something like that, anything you can throw out, like what your name or how to find you on any to like.
Yes, I should show up with my full name, David Alejandro Colonia. Those three should get the search bar going. And
Nice.
yeah, that reminds me that I have to update my LinkedIn. My mentor would definitely not be happy with where it's at. Like, what have
Yeah.
you done the last year? Like, didn't you get this job? Why didn't you update it? So that reminds me that I need to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, keep it updated. We might have some students connecting with you and maybe, reaching out to you and being like, "Hey, can
Okay,
I
sure
can I use
thing.
you as like a
I'm
reference?"
always happy
Yeah.
to. Yeah, definitely. I have like the aspirations that I can have a project that I could help people with and say like, oh, say you did this on that, and I can be one of your references, because that's so key, is having the reference and having the just somebody to vouch when you're looking for stuff. The more references that I've collected, from these jobs, the easier it's been to get another job. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it's definitely useful.
Yeah. Well, David, I appreciate your time so much, and yeah, like I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience with us. Careers really appreciates it. So,
Of course,
I
anytime.
I don't know if I actually at the beginning introduced myself, but I guess people on YouTube know my name is Sophia. But yeah, it's been great. And yeah, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your evening.
You too, Sophia. Take care. Bye bye.